from now on, India will pay 50% tariffs. We did it with Russia, and now India is next.
With Donald Trump's increasing tariffs on India, do you think India is being bullied and sanctioned by the US for the first time in history for not obeying their demands?
The Trump tariffs, they're no longer a threat, they're about to become a reality. So the immediate question is this: how does India manage the tariff shock?
Well, let's go back to the story of that time when US imposed hard sanctions on India after the Pokhran nuclear tests, and from which two of the greatest Indian organizations came up like a phoenix. This is the fascinating story of ISRO and DRDO. It was May of 1998. Something deep inside the soaring heat of the Thar Desert changed the future forever. India, under the Prime Minister Vajpayee, did the unthinkable. It detonated 5 nuclear warheads, an extraordinary, courageous and risky move at that point of time.
Today, at 15:45 hours, India conducted 3 underground nuclear tests in the Pokhran-II.
World's most elite intelligence agency, the CIA, was simply dumbfounded. Instantly, India became an independently developed nuclear arms state. What happened next was hard blowback from the only superpower of that time, the United States. Washington launched an all-out economic war, imposed very hard sanctions designed to shatter India's ambition of strategic autonomy and bring the nation down to its knees. The motive of America was clear: isolate India and stop all its strategic programs dead. But then something very interesting happened. What if the hard punishment thrown at India didn't actually break it? What if instead that punishment accidentally paved way for one of the greatest economic and technological comebacks in modern history? This is the wild story of how America's ruthless plan to paralyze India backfired, and how sanctions intended to break India became actually a catalyst for growth. Those who think Donald Trump's tariffs will break a very powerful today's India, then this story is for them. After the incomplete nuclear tests of Smiling Buddha 1974 by Prime Minister Indira Gandhi and following her assassination, and then his son Rajiv's same fate, India went through a very tough phase of economic breakdown and extreme political instability. Finally, the new government led by Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee had that vision of national security and standing tall among nations. Those 5 tests at Pokhran were the result. But to the US, this wasn't about security threat. It was a direct challenge to its invincible power. Russia was broken and China was yet to grow. Hence, the punishment mandated by US law under the Glenn Amendment was brutal and spontaneous. For India, there was hardly any power in the world to hedge. US blacklisted important ISRO and DRDO units. Critical technologies like satellite parts, launch vehicle, components, electronics and even joint R&D were denied. NASA just stopped launching Indian satellites, and Western suppliers stopped the sale of chips, precision alloys and cryogenic rocket technology. Missile guidance chips, advanced radars, jet engine components, all gone overnight. The Russian cryogenic engine deal was torn apart under US pressure. Satellite parts from Europe suddenly vanished from the supply chain, and even GPS access was restricted during the Kargil War. The US also forced the World Bank, IMF to restrict loans, and remember that India was quite weak in power and economy. Nowhere a match with today's 4th largest economy. American banks were barred from lending to the Indian government and Indian industries. By November 1998, the US had blacklisted hundreds of Indian organizations, from corporations to public research labs, cutting them off from all American partnerships and contracts. The world held its breath, expecting India to break. The initial shock was real, no doubt. Capital flows stumbled and foreign investment dropped off. For a moment, the future of India looked really dark. But here, the story takes a sharp turn. The American strategy, it turns out, had major miscalculations. This is the most significant part which the West misses out every time. India is not a new nation to the world, but it is the oldest surviving civilization. We have seen upheavals across the centuries, and we know how to play the real infinite game. First, the Indian economy was tougher than anyone actually realized. The economic reforms of 1991 had already started opening things up, making the country less dependent on foreign aid and more diversified. India's enormous domestic market was 60% of its GDP, a world of its own, and could soak up a lot of the external pressure. Plus, the US also realized that the sanctions were a double-edged sword. Within months, the Clinton administration was under pressure from the lobbying of American companies as they were losing essential business in the Indian markets. But the most disrupting impact was something nobody in Washington saw coming. The tech embargo became a massive unplanned catalyst for Indian innovation in defense and space. It was a forced march towards Atmanirbhar Bharat, decades before the term was popularized by Narendra Modi. ISRO turned inwards. Teams worked hard on reverse engineering parts, creating Indian substitutes. Out of the struggle came the indigenous cryogenic upper stage project, the upgraded Polar Satellite Launch Vehicle or the PSLV that would later send the Mangalyaan to Mars. And the INSAT satellites were built with purely Indian electronics during that time. By early 2000, ISRO not only survived without foreign tech, it was launching record-breaking missions at a fraction of the world's cost. The sanctions meant to weaken India instead forged one of the most efficient space agencies in the world, which you know today. Going the same for DRDO on the critical defense components, it had no choice but to build them itself. Scientists ate upon old electronics to study the designs, reverse engineered banned components, and ran tests on impossibly low budgets. The missile program, once slowed by foreign bottlenecks, became entirely indigenous. And out of this period came the Agni-II and Agni-III ballistic missiles, the Akash surface-to-air missile system, advanced radars, all designed and built in India. Even the Indian Air Force airborne early warning systems began taking shape with local technology during this period. By the late 2010s, DRDO, that the world has once dismissed, was exporting radars, helping build nuclear submarines and fielding missile systems that could rival global peers. Also, let's highlight that today's invincible BrahMos missile, which you know, also started to take shape during that period. After the test, India strategically announced no first-use policy and positioned itself as a responsible new nuclear power. Behind the scenes, Indian Foreign Ministry and US State Department started long, careful negotiations. As scientists were busy innovating, Indian diplomats were busy negotiating to maintain India's point of view for the tests to the world. By March 2000, the heat was cooling down. President Bill Clinton visited India, the first president to do so in 22 years, signaling a huge shift in thinking. The hard sanctions by the invincible superpower started to fall apart. Now today, DRDO is building one of the best missile technologies in the world, which you all know, especially what you have witnessed after the tremendous success of Operation Sindoor and the rise of BrahMos supremacy. Fast forward 25 years, the same spirit of self-reliance carried ISRO to one of its greatest triumphs ever, the Chandrayaan-3 mission. In August 2023, a lander named Vikram and a rover called Pragyan touched down near the moon's south pole for the first time in human history, before any other nation could do it. In an extremely small budget, India could master one of the hardest spaceflight feats, autonomous soft landing in an uncharted terrain. The nation that sanctioned India's own space institution, US, is now launching one of its most expensive observation satellite, NISAR, using India's own rocket system from Indian soil. That is coming off a full circle. The story of 1998 sanctions is a masterclass in chaos theory and complex adaptive systems. India played the long infinite game to pass through all the uncertainty, transform the punishment into resolve for growth. Do you think India's rise was always going to happen like this? Or was it kicked into high gear by America's attempt to hold it back? Let us know what you think in the comments.